The cold heart of Manhattan, Damian Cross, stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office. Watching the city lights flicker like distant stars, at 32, he commanded an empire worth billions, yet his heart felt as empty as the champagne glass in his hand. The rain streaked down the glass, reminding him of tears he had shed 3 years ago when he discovered his fiancée Rebecca with another man. That night had changed everything. Love became a liability. Trust became a weapon others used against him. He built walls around his heart so high that even his closest friends couldn't climb them. Business deals replaced romantic dinners, contracts substituted for promises, and cold calculation took the place of warm emotions. Lucas Hart, Damian's childhood friend and business partner, lounged in the leather chair across from the mahogany desk. Unlike Damian, Lucas still believed in love, still dated with hope, still smiled without calculating the cost. He watched, his friend with concern that had been growing for months. "You know what your problem is?" Lucas said, swirling his whiskey. "You've forgotten how to live?" Damian turned from the window, his expression unreadable. "I live perfectly fine. Company just closed the largest merger in tech history. That's surviving, not living." Lucas leaned forward. "When was the last time you felt something real? When did you last take a risk that wasn't calculated in spreadsheets?" "Emotions are expensive luxuries I can't afford," Damian replied, straightening his midnight blue tie. "They cloud judgment and lead to weakness." Lucas smiled, the kind of smile that usually meant trouble. "I have a proposition for you." That evening at the annual charity gala at the Metropolitan Museum, Lucas pointed across the crowded ballroom. "See her? Violet Storm." Damian followed his gaze to see a woman who seemed to command attention without trying. Her emerald green dress hugged her curves perfectly. Her raven hair cascaded over one shoulder, and her laugh rang out above the orchestra's music. She moved through the crowd like a force of nature, leaving whispered conversations and turned heads in her wake. "The tabloid princess?" Damian asked, recognizing her from countless gossip magazines. "The one who crashed her car into the fountain at Lincoln Center?" "The very same," Lucas grinned. "Violet Storm, 26 years old, heir to the Storm media fortune, according to every newspaper in the city, completely untamable." Damian watched as Violet charmed a group of elderly philanthropists, then scandalized them by removing her high heels and dancing barefoot on the marble floor. She was everything he avoided in women: unpredictable, emotional, chaotic. "Here's my challenge," Lucas continued. "Transform her into the perfect society wife. 3 months. If you can tame that wild spirit and make her into someone your board of directors would approve of, I'll sign over my 20% stake in Hart Technologies." Damian raised an eyebrow. "That stake was worth $50 million. And if I fail, you give me your beach house in the Hamptons, and more importantly, you admit that some things can't be controlled or bought." It should have been an easy refusal, if Damian had no interest in marriage, real or pretend. But something about the challenge sparked a competitive fire he hadn't felt in years. Maybe it was her defiant smile, or the way she seemed immune to the disapproval of those around her. Maybe it was simply that Lucas had found the one bet Damian couldn't walk away from. The approach Damian made his move during the auction portion of the evening. Violet was bidding on a painting, an abstract piece that seemed as chaotic as she was. When the price reached astronomical heights, Damian stepped in, outbidding her. With a calm raise of his paddle, her eyes met across the room. Where he expected anger, he found amusement. She applauded his victory with obvious sarcasm, then disappeared into the crowd. He found her on the museum's rooftop terrace, leaning against the stone balustrade with the city sprawling below her. She lit a cigarette despite the no-smoking signs posted everywhere. "Damian Cross," she said without turning around. "The Ice King himself. Come to gloat about your victory. I came to make you an offer." She turned then, studying him with eyes the color of storm clouds. "I'm listening. Marry me." Violet laughed, a sound both musical and sharp. "That's quite a proposition from a man I've never spoken to before tonight." "It would be a business arrangement," Damian continued, his voice steady despite the absurdity of what he was proposing. 6 months. You get access to my resources. protection from whatever scandal you're running from, and a generous settlement when it ends. I get a wife who won't embarrass me at board meetings." Violet took a long drag from her cigarette, studying him through the smoke. "What makes you think I need protection from anything?" "Everyone needs something," Damian replied. "The question is whether we can help each other get it." For a moment, something flickered across her face, vulnerability, perhaps, or recognition. Then the mask slipped back into place. "And what makes you think you can tame me, Mr. Cross?" "Don't want to tame you," he said, surprising himself with the honesty. "I want to make a deal with you." Violet flicked her cigarette over the edge of the terrace, watching it fall into the darkness below. When she looked back at him, her expression was unreadable. "You're serious." "I'm always serious about business. This isn't business. This is insanity." She stepped closer, and he caught the scent of her perfumes, something wild and intoxicating. "But I suppose I've been called crazy before. Is that a yes?" She studied his face in the moonlight, as if searching for something. "What's really in this for you, Damian Cross? A man like you doesn't need a wife for appearances. Your reputation is already sterling." The question caught him off guard. He couldn't very well tell her about the bet, about Lucas's challenge, about the $50 million at stake. But something in her eyes demanded honesty. "Maybe I'm tired of being predictable," he said finally. "Now that," she said, stepping back with a smile that was both dangerous and beautiful, "is the first interesting thing you've said all night." She moved toward the door, then paused. "I'll think about it. How long do you need?" "You my answer, tomorrow night. Meet me at the Starlight Lounge on 5th Avenue, 10 o'clock. She disappeared back into the gala. Damian realized he had just made the most impulsive decision of his carefully controlled life, and for the first time in 3 years, he felt truly alive. The deal, the Starlight Lounge, buzzed with the energy of Manhattan's elite, but Damian barely noticed the crowd, sat in a corner booth, nursing a whiskey and checking his watch for the third time. 10:15. She was late. When Violet finally arrived, she commanded the room's attention as effortlessly as she had at the gala. Tonight she wore a simple black dress that somehow made her look more dangerous than the emerald gown had. She slid into the booth across from him without apology. "You're late." "I'm here," she replied, signaling the waitress. "Vodka martini, 3 olives, dirty." They sat in silence until her drink arrived. Violet took a sip, then fixed him with those storm-gray eyes. "I've been thinking about your proposition. A business marriage to a man I don't know for 6 months, with no guarantee either of us will survive." It intact. Damian's jaw tightened. "If you're not interested, I didn't say I wasn't interested." She leaned forward. "But I have conditions, name them. First, I want full access to your legal team. There are some complications in my life that need handling. Done. Second, I choose my own wardrobe. I won't be turned into some cookie-cutter society wife. Within reason. Third, separate bedrooms. This may be a marriage on paper, but my body isn't part of the contract." Something twisted in Damian's chest at her words, though he couldn't name what it was. "Agreed." "And finally," she said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper, "when this is over, we walk away clean. No messy emotions, no looking back. No second thoughts. That's exactly what I want." She extended her hand across the table. "Then we have a deal, Mr. Cross." As their hands touched, Damian felt a jolt of electricity that had nothing to do with static. Her skin was soft and warm, and for a moment he forgot how to breathe. "There's just one more thing," Violet said, not releasing his hand. "What?" "The media will be all over this. They'll dig into both our pasts, scrutinize every move we make. Are you prepared for that level of attention?" Damian thought of Rebecca, of the humiliation he'd endured when their relationship imploded in the tabloids. "I can handle the press. Can you handle me?" The question hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning he didn't fully understand. Looking into her eyes, he saw layers of complexity that intrigued and unsettled him in equal measure. "I guess we'll find out." 3 days later, they stood in the chambers of Judge Patricia Henley, speaking vows that meant nothing and everything. Violet wore a simple cream-colored dress that somehow made her look ethereal. When the judge pronounced them husband and wife, Damian kissed her for the first time, a brief, formal press of lips that sent fire through his veins. As they signed the marriage certificate, Violet's hand trembled slightly. It was the first crack in her composed facade he'd seen, and it made him wonder what secret she was hiding behind those storm-gray eyes. "Well, Mrs. Cross," he said as they walked down the courthouse steps, "ready to play house?" "Ready as I'll ever be," she replied, but her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Neither of them spoke during the drive to his penthouse. The weight of what they'd just done settled between them like a wall. They were married now, bound by law, if not by love, and Damian couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just made the most dangerous deal of his life. The unexpected truth the first month of their marriage was a careful dance of avoidance. Violet threw herself into charity events and social functions, playing the role of the perfect society wife with surprising grace. Damian watched her transform. From the wild, unpredictable woman he'd married into someone polished and refined, and he should have been pleased. This was exactly what Lucas had challenged him to do. But something felt wrong. The fire in her eyes had dimmed, replaced by a hollow politeness that made his chest ache. She spoke when spoken to, smiled when expected, and retreated to her room each night without a word. "You're winning the bet," Lucas observed one evening as they shared drinks in Damian's study. "She's become the perfect corporate wife." Damian replied, but the victory felt hollow. "You don't sound happy about it." Damian stared into his whiskey. "She's not herself anymore, isn't that the point?" "You wanted her tamed?" "I wanted her transformed, not broken." Lucas raised an eyebrow. "Don't tell me you're actually falling for her." The question hit too close to home. Damian had been watching Violet for weeks now, studying her like a puzzle he couldn't solve. He'd noticed how she only picked at her food during their formal dinners, how she stood at the window of her room late at night, how she flinched whenever he got too close. "It's not about feelings," Damian said. "It's about the terms of our agreement. She's holding up her end. I should be satisfied." But he wasn't satisfied. He was restless, distracted, and increasingly concerned about his wife's well-being. The truth came out on a rainy Thursday evening. Damian returned home early from a business trip to find Violet on the bathroom floor, unconscious. He called 911, his hands shaking as he checked for a pulse. At the hospital, Dr. Sarah Chen delivered news that changed everything. "Your wife is severely malnourished and dehydrated," she said. "When was the last time she ate a full meal?" "I don't know. She always says she's eaten already." "Mr. Cross, your wife is suffering from an eating disorder. This appears to be a long-term issue, not something recent." The words hit him like a physical blow. All those barely touched dinners, the way she'd grown thinner over the past month, the hollow look in her eyes, it all made terrible sense now. "She needs help," Dr. Chen continued. "Professional help, and she needs support from her family." Damian sat beside Violet's hospital bed. Watching her sleep, he felt something crack inside his chest. This wasn't about the bet anymore. This wasn't about taming anyone or proving a point. This was about the woman he'd married, the woman he'd been too blind to really see. When Violet woke up, she found him holding her hand. "Oh, you don't have to. Stay," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "I know this isn't what you signed up for. Tell me about the eating disorder." She turned away. "It's not your problem. You're my wife." "That makes it my problem." "I'm your wife on paper. This is real life, Damian. It's complicated real life." "Then tell me about the mess." For a long moment she was silent. Then the words came tumbling out. The pressure from her family to be perfect, the constant scrutiny. From the media, the way she'd used control over food as the one thing in her life that felt manageable. The eating disorder had started in college and had been her secret companion ever since. "The tabloids call me wild and reckless," she said, tears streaming down her face. "But the truth is, I'm terrified of everything. Food, intimacy, letting anyone see who I really am. Why did you agree to marry me?" She looked at him then, really looked at him, "Because you offered me protection, and I needed it. Not from scandal, but from myself. I thought if I could be the perfect wife, maybe I could be perfect enough to matter." You matter, he said, the words coming from somewhere deep inside him. You matter, Violet. Not because you're perfect, but because you're you. She closed her eyes. I've never been enough for anyone. Not my parents, not the media, not even myself. You're enough for me. The words surprised them both. Damian realized he meant them completely, and that terrified him more than any business deal ever had. The heart's true victory the next 3 months were nothing like the first. Damian canceled business trips to drive Violet to therapy appointments. He learned to cook simple meals and sat with her during the difficult moments when eating felt impossible. He watched her fight her demons with a courage that humbled him. Slowly, the real Violet began to emerge. Not the wild tabloid princess or the perfect society wife, but someone in between, a woman who laughed at his terrible jokes, who challenged his rigid thinking, who made him see the world in colors he'd forgotten existed. You're different, Lucas observed one evening as they watched Violet play piano in the living room. You're not the same man who made that bet. No, Damian agreed, unable to take his eyes off his wife. I'm not. She's not what you expected. Either she's everything I never knew I needed. Lucas studied his friend's face. You love her? The words should have terrified him. 6 months ago, they would have sent him running. But now, watching Violet's fingers dance across the keys, seeing the genuine smile on her face, Damian felt only certainty. Yes, I love her. What about the bet? Keep your 50 million, Damian said. I got something worth more. That night, he found Violet on the terrace where they'd first talked. But this time she wasn't hiding behind cigarettes and sarcasm. She was simply herself, beautiful, vulnerable, real. Our 6 months are almost up, she said without looking at him. I know. I've been thinking about what happens next. His heart clenched, and she turned to face him, and he saw something in her eyes he'd never seen before. I was thinking, she said slowly, that maybe we could try again. As a business arrangement this time, but as something real. Violet, I know you don't love me, she continued quickly.
Right.
I know this was just a deal for you. But these past few months, you've shown me what it feels like to be cared for, to be seen. And I thought maybe I love you. The words stopped. Her mid-sentence. She stared at him, eyes wide. I love you, he repeated, stepping closer. I love your strength, your courage, your terrible taste in morning television. I love the way you hum while you cook and how you cry at dog commercials. I love all of you, Violet Stormcross. Tears spilled down her cheeks. You love me. I love you. And if you'll have me, I want to spend the rest of my life proving it. She launched herself into his arms, and he caught her, spinning her around as she laughed and cried simultaneously. When he set her down, she cupped his face in her hands. I love you too, she whispered. I think I have since that first night on the terrace, when you told me you didn't want to tame me. I couldn't tame you even if I wanted to. You're a force of nature, and you're my anchor in the storm. They kissed then, not the formal press of lips from their wedding day, but something real and desperate and full of promise. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Violet smiled up at him. So what happens now? Damian said, pulling her close. We start over. No bets, no contracts, no conditions. It's just us. Just us, she agreed. A year later, they renewed their vows in a small ceremony surrounded by friends and family. Violet wore a flowing white dress that made her look like an angel, and when she walked down the aisle, Damian felt his heart stop. You know, Lucas said as they watched their wives dance together at the reception, I think I lost that bet after all. How do you figure you were supposed to tame her? Instead, she tamed you. Damian watched his wife throw her head back in laughter, wild and free and perfectly herself, and smiled. Best loss of my life, as the evening wound down, Damian. And Violet stood on the same terrace where their story had begun. The city spread out below them, full of lights and possibilities. Any regrets? Violet asked, leaning against his chest. Only one, he said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. Is that? I wish I'd found you sooner. She turned in his arms, eyes bright with love and mischief. Well, you've got me. Now, Forever? Forever? And as they kissed under the stars, Damian realized that some bets were meant to be lost. Some walls were meant to be torn down, and some hearts were meant to be surrendered completely. The end.